The desert sun hung heavy over the camp of Israel, but inside the tent of Jamin, the air was filled with a different kind of weight, the weight of a new way of living. Jamin was a young man who had grown up in the shadow of Egyptian brick-kilns, where the only law was the lash of the taskmaster and the only goal was survival. But now, in the wilderness, a new voice was speaking through Moses. It was the voice of the Lord, and it was calling them to something radical. One morning, as the dew evaporated from the manna-covered ground, Jamin sat with his grandfather, Eli. They were discussing the words Moses had spoken from the entrance of the tent of the Lord's presence. It seems so difficult, grandfather, Jamin sighed. Everything is about purity. What we eat, how we wash, how we harvest. Why can't we just live like the nations around us? Eli looked at his grandson with eyes that had seen much. Because, Jamin, we are not like the other nations. The Lord told Moses, "Be holy, because I, the Lord your God, am holy." Leviticus 19:2. To be holy isn't just about being good. It means to be set apart. It means living differently so the world knows whose people we are. To Jamin, this felt abstract until the harvest came. Jamin worked a small plot of grain on the outskirts of the camp's allotted land. As he swung his sickle, he noticed the stalks at the very edge of his field were thick and golden. He reached out to cut them, but Eli stayed his hand. "Remember the law of the harvest, Jamin," Eli whispered. Jamin recited the words he had heard. "When you harvest your fields, do not cut the grain at the edges, and do not go back to get the heads of grain that were left. Do not go back through your vineyard to gather the grapes that were missed, or to pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for poor people and foreigners. I am the Lord your God." Leviticus 19:2, 9-10. Jamin looked at the edges of his field. To his Egyptian-trained mind, leaving that grain was a waste. But as he stepped back, he saw a group of foreigners, people who had left Egypt with them but had no land of their own, moving in quietly to gather what remained. He saw a widow, her face lined with grief, filling her shawl with the grain he had intentionally left behind. In that moment, purity wasn't a ritual, it was a heartbeat. Living differently meant that Jamin's profit was less important than his neighbor's hunger. A few days later, Jamin went to the central marketplace to trade some of his grain for a new pair of sandals. He watched as a merchant used a stone weight that looked slightly worn down on the edges, a trick to make the customer think they were getting more than they were. Jamin felt the temptation to do the same with his grain measure. Asterisk, everyone does it. Asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, this is how you get ahead. Asterisk. But then, the words of the law echoed in his mind. Do not use dishonest standards of measurement of length, weight, or capacity. Use honest scales and weights in full-sized measures. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:35-36. Jamin chose to use a full, honest measure. The merchant looked at him with surprise, then with a flicker of respect. By choosing a pure way of doing business, Jamin was showing that his God was a God of truth, even in the smallest transactions of a dusty marketplace. As the sun began to set, Jamin walked back toward his family's tent. He passed a group of young men who were laughing. They were standing near a man named Caleb, who had been deaf since birth. The young men were shouting insults at him, knowing he couldn't hear them, and one had placed a large rock in the path where Caleb was walking. Jamin's blood boiled. He remembered the command. Do not curse a deaf person or put something in front of a blind person to make him stumble. Have reverence for me. EMT, Lord, Leviticus 19:14. Jamin stepped forward, moved the rock, and placed a firm, protective hand on Caleb's shoulder. He looked the other young men in the eye. They looked away, shamed. Living differently meant protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, not because it was convenient, but because God was watching. That night, as the pillar of fire began to glow over the tabernacle, Jamin sat again with Eli. I understand now. Grandfather, Jamin said quietly, purity isn't about being better than others. It's about being a mirror. If we live with compassion, honesty, and justice, we reflect the Lord. Eli nodded. And the greatest reflection of all, Jamin, is the hardest one of all. He pointed to the scroll of the law. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against any of your people, but love your neighbors as you love yourself. EMT, Lord Leviticus, 19 et 18. Jamin realized then that Leviticus wasn't just a book of rules for an ancient desert people. It was a call to a higher humanity. It was a roadmap for a society where the weak are protected, the poor are fed, the truth is spoken, and love is the final word. By living differently, they weren't just following a code, they were inviting the presence of God to dwell in their midst. If you found this story of ancient wisdom and modern application inspiring, please give this video a like, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more journeys through the Word of God, from Genesis to Revelation.